everyone.
Hello.
Hi there. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much, Mary Beth and Jim, for being here to give people some great employment advice today.
It's really our pleasure.
Awesome. We have a really great packed 30 minutes ahead with great information about how to retain a new job, how to reconnect at your current job, who's hiring, training, coaching, and I'm super excited to get right into it. So Jim and Mary Beth Bos are with MBJ Group based out of Sarasota, Florida. Some of you, I'm sure, know them. And for those of you who don't know them, we have a great, really information session coming up with tons of good stuff to know. So just to start off, Mary Beth, can you tell us a little bit about MBJ Group?
Happy to. Our company is now 20 years old, which is amazing. And what we do, we recruit and facilitate searches where we're bringing in professionals, both in the corporate arena and in nonprofit organizations. We use behavioral assessments in everything that we do, and Jim will be talking about that a little bit later. We also help people that are in career transition or people that are moving into the community that don't know the labor market. We help them to find the right fit with the right company or organization and something that they're really passionate about. Then the other thing that we do is we use coaching through both of those entities that I just talked about, the searches and the career transition. And then my husband, he performs behavioral assessments for a number of companies in the hiring practice.
Wow, so prevalent and timely to be doing this now when so many people are looking for something new or are out of a job. I'm sure you've been pretty busy. Any other services that you offer? I think you just pretty much listed off everything. Any other services that you offer?
I think Jim could talk about two that he does specifically.
Okay. We can get into that for sure.
Benchmarking that you do, Jim?
Well, before we jump into that too, I know you two do different things within the organization too. So Mary Beth, do you want to start just with what do you do specifically? How do your roles differ?
Okay. This has been really a phenomenal type of activity that we've been involved with. I think back and I think, what were we thinking starting a talent management company? And we've been married for quite a long time. The best part is we're still married. Our behavioral styles work well for each other. So I really take the lead in the searches, and then Jim comes in on the assessment part. So when we finally get down to probably the final 3 or 2 candidates, they go online and they take a battery of behavioral assessments. And then Jim prepares for the organization a comparison report. And it's based on the benchmark that he's done prior, and he can talk about that a little bit later. And it really helps us to find out who's the best fit for that particular job. This is taking into consideration that both of those 3 candidates or both of the candidates have the qualifications and the background to do the job. Then my husband comes in, and when we are processing the candidates in the search business, I have him go through the assessments because people don't like to sit still for a very long period of time. So he can be very concise, and he can point out the advantages of each candidate. And it's up to the company to hire the person that they desire. We don't tell them who to hire.
That's super interesting. And I do want to point out too, I know you work with nonprofit organizations and private organizations. And Jim, can you tell us a little bit more about the onboarding process that you help organizations with?
Well, before you get there, I want to talk a little bit more about the roles that each of us play in the process. Mary Beth mentioned the searches that we do, as well as, what should I say, companies using our assessments in their hiring process. And by the way, we can do that any place in the country. We have a number of companies that we work with out of state. Just because we're in Florida doesn't make any difference where we are. As long as we can talk to them, they can get online and do the assessments. Bam, that's how it works. So a lot of what I do is helping companies find the right people. Finding the right people, we can help them probably 75 to 85% of the time find the right person. Our goal is in making sure 100% of the time you don't hire the wrong person. And we do this through our assessment process. And as Mary Beth said, we have a battery of assessments that we use, and that can make a huge difference. So one of the other things that Mary Beth didn't mention that we do for organization, we help benchmark jobs. Now, what do I mean by benchmarking? A job has certain requirements. Forget about people for right now, but what does the job require? Or key accountabilities. So we figure out, working with individuals within the organization, what those key accountabilities are. Once we know what they are, now we can evaluate that and determine what behaviors, drivers, and EQs are important. And why do I mention that? So we look at behaviors, what your DISC style is. We look at what drives your behaviors. And more recently, we've had in the last year or so, emotional quotient. So you and I could be the exact same behaviorally, as well as our drivers, but we add in the emotional quotient and the whole ball game changes. And we can take those and put them all together and make a difference from a management perspective. We can help you manage each individual employee better.
Wow. I'm sure that's so helpful to organizations because, as everyone knows, hiring the wrong person can be an incredible waste of time for the employee and the employer. So that's got to be a huge benefit for companies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me go on then to the onboarding process.
Great.
Onboarding has been very strong over the last few years. What do we mean by onboarding? Onboarding is bringing a new employee into the organization and orientate them as much as you can up front. If you have a good onboarding program, more than likely your retention rate or retention level will go up significantly. If you don't have an onboarding program, there's major problems. Okay. Now, what's happening today? We got a whole new world. Okay. In the whole new world, quote unquote, what's happening now is reboarding. You have to reboard employees back on. So all of a sudden you're opening the office back up. You have to reboard them. But there's a whole process you need to go through because people have been working from home, et cetera, for a long time. They have a whole different concept, et cetera, and you don't know where their fears are or their scary parts coming back into an office. And so reboarding becomes very important. Along with that is re-engagement. How are you going to re-engage them in the work process in an office environment that now has changed? Okay, as well as reconnect them with various parts of the organization. How are you going to reconnect them? Amazing. We now have a new assessment that Target Training International, which is the company we use, just came out called the Engagement Report, which gets into every one of these three areas. And it's phenomenal in terms of how we can, shall we say, look at individuals and talk to individuals. And we can use this even with companies that we've been working with for a long time. So as they start bringing people back, they can use this in their process of reboarding them into the organization.
I'm sure that's so helpful because it's really a thing that businesses never had to think about. And I'm sure no one has these policies in place. So to have that as a resource, no one ever thought that they were going to have to bring their workforce back from being remote or even halfway back. What other trends are you starting to see now that businesses are opening up again?
Well, one of the trends that is there, and it hasn't gone away. You have a specialty job you want to fill. You couldn't fill it 6 months ago. You can't fill it today. Yeah. The same problem exists, exact same problem. finding that right person. And that's where MBJ Group can come in and be very helpful in that process. Now, again, the key also is there's more people out there. Another phenomenon that's occurred as a result of where we're at today is that more employees have evaluated where they're at. Is this really the company I want to be with? We have been getting calls from people at very high up in organizations basically saying, don't tell anybody, but I'm looking. Okay. I'm curious. This is happening fairly regularly. And why is it happening? Because they've had a chance to sit at home. They don't have to go to the office. They're sitting there saying, hey, I'm not sure I want to stay with this company. So consequently, that's another phenomena that's starting to occur.
Well, and I think to your point, people are probably also realizing that you can sort of see the true colors of an organization when the chips are down or when it's a stressful situation. So that makes a lot of sense. For people who are out of a job, what should they be doing, Mary Beth?
It's really tough, and it's tough to keep yourself excited and engaged. I want to give somebody an idea. I really believe in networking and making sure people are aware that you're looking for employment and using all the contacts that you have, corporate, church, volunteers, organizations, because there's always people that are employed that can tell you about an opening. One of the things, I don't think it helps for somebody to be on that computer daily for excessive hours, sending your resume out to any job that comes up in foremost. I do realize that some people, in order to provide for their family, they really need a job. In that case, go get a job, but keep looking for the primary job that you really can be passionate about. For example, one thing that you can do that I think is really helpful in looking for work is research your companies or organizations and find the ones that you really are impressed with that fit your value system, and try to find a contact in that company that you can sit down and have an engaging conversation, whether that's on Zoom, whether that's a telephone call. You might not be able to get in to see them in person, but do your homework and try to find that ideal job that way.
That makes a lot of sense. Definitely. I mean, throughout your network, your personal network, people probably know of things that are not even necessarily posted online. Can you give people who are watching any clues as to who is hiring right now, Jim?
Hey, you go to the Economic Development Corporation in your community. Usually they have a list. Go to Career Source. They have a list. Pay attention to what's going on in your local paper, whether it's electronically or in print. There's always opportunities out there. To say there's one specific area, that's not true. Look at Publix. Publix has been hiring. I'm trying to think of our window manufacturer. PGT just hired over 100 people, and they're still looking for people. Okay, yeah. So they're doing, shall we say, online hiring processes. Career Source. Whether it's here in Florida or elsewhere, they have opportunities coming up constantly. So there are opportunities. It might not be what you want, okay, right at that moment. But as Mary Beth said, hey, if it's a question of putting food on the table, there's opportunities out there. And then keep looking for that job you're going to be passionate about.
Yeah, and I think that's really an important point about using a talent management company is that sometimes I'm sure you hear about things before they're ever even posted.
Yeah. I wanted to also state most organizations and companies now post their job openings on their website. Almost all of them do, especially the large one like Memorial Hospital that's here in our community. It's a big 950-bed facility, and they post all of their jobs. So don't forget to look there.
Definitely. And you mentioned PGT Innovation. So I know they just recently did a virtual job fair and they did a drive-through job fair. So how has COVID-19 changed the hiring process?
For us, I'm going to go back and I'm going to give you a couple examples. In March, we were doing 5 searches, and that's probably the most that we've ever done at one time. We finished the first 2. The third one was for an executive director of a nonprofit organization. They had to fill that position. We did it all by Zoom because the organization was closed. And it was really amazing. Jim and I really learned a lot, and we had to kind of change a lot of the things that we were doing, such as we have a rating sheet for the search team that we worked with, and there were 5 members on that team. And right after they have the interview, we have them fill out a survey sheet of how they feel about that person before any discussion happens, because I want to get a feel from the group. And so Jim had to come up with some ideas of how we could process that while we're on Zoom. And we did, and it worked out great. We really had some excellent candidates. In fact, we had 2 that were really tight, and it was really close. And our assessments really helped in that process, differentiating between their behavioral styles. And one was more analytical and more steady. The other one was more of a influencing and a driver, like my husband. So that's the one they ended up hiring. But assessments are even more important today. And then when the person is hired, we let them listen to that. They're on the job for probably about 30 days. And then Jim and I work with that individual, and we go through the results of their assessment. And it usually takes us about 3 or 4 hours to do that. But that goes back to what Jim was talking about as far as onboarding them into the organization, which is really helpful.
You mentioned earlier that you've had to adapt personally and you've learned a lot of new skills. How has MBJ Group, as you know, a lot of other business owners have really had to adapt their businesses to this new virtual world? What have you had to do?
I think the one area that I'm a little disappointed about is that in our world before, and I'm sure it's not going to be the same ever again, I would be out there marketing, meeting people for breakfast and for lunch one-on-one. And that's how we would draw them into our business. Well, I haven't been able to do that because people aren't willing to meet with you one-on-one.
Right.
So I've had to do more phone calling, more emailing. It's important to keep MBJ Group, our name out there, that we can be helpful to employers. So it's a little bit different way of doing things. The other thing, out of those 5 searches, 2 of them were for business development positions. Well, they're on hold, and they're going to be on hold until our economy gets moving again, because how can they do business development if most of our businesses, they're not there working?
Right.
So that's been a real change. And I think Jim can really talk about, from the corporate standpoint, and a number of our corporations that use our assessments in the hiring practice, they've been doing something a little bit unique. Maybe Jim can talk about that.
Yeah, it's been interesting to sort of watch what's been happening with companies. All of a sudden, I mentioned earlier, individuals within companies are starting to look and say, hey, I'm not so sure I want this. But the companies we've been dealing with all of a sudden are also reevaluating their people. So basically, during the month of July, and even here starting into August, a number of companies have been doing assessments on their people, trying to decide, okay, maybe this person isn't in the right job. Maybe we should move them to another position, or maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. And so they've been going through and using the assessments again and asking for feedback from us to try to get a flavor for what we see on paper that may help them in that process. So that's been a fascinating thing to see occurring.
That's really interesting. I know, Jim, you offer a complimentary work from home report. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and why people should use that?
Well, it's basically a basic DISC report: dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. That's what it is. And it's a very basic. You can go online, you can go onto our website. It's on our website. You can click there, you automatically get it, etc. And you can take a look, and it'll tell you what your basic style is. And it will basically tell you how you best can work from home, dealing with different individuals, dealing on a screen, etc., how best you can go about that process. So it's a relatively simple report. It's a basic report. It's free. It's available to anyone who would be interested.
I will just give you a huge plug because, you know, my company went through the DISC assessments with you, and it was hugely valuable to see the different working styles of our employees. And you not only get insight into yourself and your own working style, but you also get insight into how you can best work with your team members. And it's incredibly valuable. I think it's just dead on too. We were all kind of shocked at how accurate it was.
A number of years ago, I used to say they were 95, 96% accurate. Target Training International has gotten so good at this. They're getting an assessment into their system once every 8 seconds from someplace in the world. So consequently, the data they have. So now I basically say things are 98, 99% accurate, and they are so accurate. It is scary. It is a little scary.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Do you have any best practices or tips for employers about how they can best adjust to this whole work at home scenario?
Well, one of the things you need to make sure you have is a work from home policy. What are your standards for working from home? And
So
you
important.
need to have that in your employee handbook. And most companies do not have that. Okay, so consequently, you need to have one of those so employees know what their expectations are, even working from home. Now, many companies have found, and we're seeing this, that it's better working from home. They've been more successful having people working from home than coming into the office. Fantastic. But another tip would be, hey, are you checking in on those are your employees that are working from home on a regular basis? Hey, how are they doing? What's going on? Are they running into problems? Is their system working well? Are they making contact with people that you would expect they would be making with? Again, the typical management process. But now you have to go through another step. You have to literally make an effort to go electronically or telephonically, some way to get there to talk to them on a regular basis. One of the other keys is finding out, what are they fearful of? Are they afraid they're going to get the coronavirus? Are they afraid for their kids? Are they afraid for their grandparents that are living for them, etc.? You need to talk about these things. If you just ignore it, those are the people who are going to start looking because they don't think you're interested in them. So those would be a couple of tips.
That's great advice. I know that even during this whole crazy time, MBJ Group has had some pretty substantial placements. Can you talk about some of the recent placements that you've had, Mary Beth?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We worked with the Sarasota Military Academy, and we placed an executive director for their foundation. That was an incredible journey. We had to structure the job a little bit differently. In the beginning, they were going to hire just a chief development officer reporting to the head of school when they had a separate foundation. So really, in discussing with the employer that the right way to set this up and for that person to have accountability would be for that person to be the executive director. Another one that we did was for a long-term healthcare facility, brought in a chief development officer, And this was really pretty amazing in that we were able to bring in somebody that had just a very vast experience. And this organization really needed that. I still remember when the person agreed to take the job, how happy that whole team was. They wanted this person, and this person wanted to work with them. So it was really a good fit. And then the one that I mentioned a little while ago was we looked for executive director of Turning Points, and that's an organization in Bradenton, Florida. And their first executive director was retiring after 14 years. So that was a big thing for the board to really evaluate what were they really looking for in a new executive director. And I really had the opportunity to work with a great president of the board who is very passionate, hands-on, really committed to the organization. And the team that he put together, it was probably one of the greatest teams I've ever worked with as far as commitment and really dedication to the cause. And that's an organization that works with the homeless and the working poor. So it's not an easy mission for them to be involved with. But those are three that I can think of just right off the bat. But I pretty much work in the nonprofit role where Jim handles the corporate role. And so it just depends on if the search is corporate, then Jim's the lead person, and then I help. So we kind of go back and forth. So it works good for us.
And it really goes to show that good organizations are hiring and good people are looking for new placements. So, a lot of people are still sort of doing that hybrid schedule, working at home a little bit, working at the office. My husband is home 3 days a week and I always work at home. So I know you have a new product that would be perfect for me and my husband. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We have a new product too. We've had it for some time. We've just sort of updated it in light of what's going on in our world today. And it's called Coaching Couples. Okay. And it's a question of how do you communicate in any relationship? Okay. Especially now that you're home on a regular basis. How do you communicate well together or know that you're communicating appropriately? Okay. One of the keys is knowing the how of your actions, okay, which are behaviors. Another one is the why of your actions, which are your drivers, okay, and how these interact together. As I mentioned earlier, now we've added another one into the process, and that's the EQ, the emotional quotient. So we look at that, and it changes the ball game in terms of how do you communicate. Because, for instance, Mary Beth and I are very similar in styles, okay? We're very similar in our drivers. Our same top drivers are the same. They're just in slightly different orders. But emotionally, we come to things wholly differently because of our background and our history. So we want to go through that process and sort of find out how do you connect then together, especially now that you're sitting at home, seeing yourself 24 hours a day, okay, 7 days a week, etc. How do you make that work for yourself? And we have this whole process that we can lead a couple through, or anybody in any relationship. We have this process that we can help work you through that mechanic in about 9 sessions, in about 90 days, about 3-hour sessions a month. And we're excited about it. We're already working with our first couple in the process, and we hope we can add a whole lot more in the process, because it's something that we have sort of done all along, but we hadn't put it into, shall we say, an appropriate package that we can promote it. So we're excited.
Obviously, you know what you're talking about because you all have been married for a long time and have worked together all that time, and you make it work. So you not only talk the talk, but you walk the walk. So This has been such great information. I want to remind everyone that if they do want more information about your services, what you provide, they can check out the website, which is scrolling below. It's mbjgroup.com. All of your contact information is on there. Do you have any last closing thoughts before we say goodbye?
I think I just add one for those that are out looking for work. Really come up with what you're passionate about, focus on that, and go in and try to get a job in that arena instead of saying, well, I can do anything. That's the hardest person for me to try to place. Okay.
Definitely. Jim, any closing thoughts?
Again, that passion thing is key. And we've had a number of people that I've been working with recently that I've suggested they're still in an industry. Find a segment within that industry. There may be a very small piece that you hadn't thought of, okay, that you know about, but you never considered looking at and say, they could use me in that area. And that's where you find those things that you can get excited about, get up every day, and as Mary Beth said, be passionate about and enjoy what you do.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for your time. Thank you, everybody who is watching. And if you do want more information, check them out at mbjgroup.com. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye now.